heroes in a half shell. Turtle power.
Dave Sim, that would be me, interviews Corbin Eastman in a multi-part series on the origins of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 8, 1986, the Cerebus crossover, the front cover of which recently auctioned for an eye-watering $78,000 at HA.com. Turtles 8 Remastered 2023 is being offered March 1st to March 31st on Kickstarter, with a series of variant covers by some of today's hottest indie creators. Don't miss it. And don't miss Kevin's 12-piece Turtles art auction, including a page from Turtles number 8 with Cerebus on it, coming in the March 30th to April 2nd Heritage Signature Auction at HA.com. Also in the March 30th to April 2nd Heritage Signature Auction, my 3 Turtles number 8 variant covers. Now, let's talk to Kevin.
15-foot by 20-foot painting by Delacroix or something and just go, oh my God. But yeah, to me, that was, the impact was the same. Looking at a Corbin page that close was just absolute sheer heaven. Amazing.
So how many times did you visit Corbin?
But I think it was 3 total, and it was and you know, much to my chagrin, one of the last times I was there, which was in the last couple of years. Actually, it was pre-COVID, because we do the Planet Comic Con in Kansas City, and he had moved about an hour outside of the city, and I kept in touch. I traded notes with Donna, his wife, and said, I'm going to be in town, and I'd love to come up and have a coffee and say hi. And just the show got busy, everything got crazy, so suddenly it was like 9 o'clock at night on the last night. Sunday night we were there, and I just ran out of time, and we were flying out early Monday. So I said, well, next time I'll come by. And then, COVID, and then unfortunately he passed away. But it was a couple years later. But it was one of those, should have made the time.
You never know in that situation.
Yeah, but he was a different kind of guy. I mean, he was very introverted in many ways, and at times, and I would talk to him on the phone a number of times, certainly through the heavy metal years, but other times, and it'd be goofy Corbin Eastman going, "Hey Richard, how's it going? What's up, man? I just this is really great." He'd be like, "Uh-huh," and I'd go, "Da, da, 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 da," and he'd be like, "Okay." So I don't know if I just freaked him out, or he just was, he's got so many cool things going on inside of that head of his, because he was so prolific.
I know.
Yeah, like yourself. He just churned out an amazing amount of work. But yeah, anyway. So, yeah,
but the level of effort, like to do what he was doing, I'm not a huge airbrush fan, but it was just jaw-dropping when we would be, trading comics in the mail. I just got one of these. Did he really have time to do another one of these, complete airbrushed stories where, as I told you, I still haven't even attempted the airbrush because it's like, no, I just don't have the patience for something like that. So I think maybe that's part of somebody with a superhuman level of patience is probably going to be, by their nature, reticent or appear reticent or inward-facing or something. It's just, man, you'd be spending so much time so intensely doing what you were doing, and as I mentioned to you before, the fact that he invented this way of doing color for Warren magazines. Here's a way that you'll be able to do color where you're not having to pay for actual color separations because I'm going to do them all with an airbrush. It's like, that's insane.
Yep, it was. And it was, I think it really was his way to stand out, to stand apart, and a way to accomplish something that, he put his mind to it. And certainly coming out of the, animation training, where, that he did, where they would film lots of things on, multi-plane cameras, and then for different kinds of depths of effects and color correction. You can see that there's definitely something within that context that he really grasped and figured out, and innovated all of his own. But I'll tell you that, what's interesting about what you said, even through the airbrush stuff, but through the different periods, the underground stuff, is art always had a consistency to it, the drawing style and the things that he was doing, but he was always experimenting. And that, just as a quick example, is I remember buying a short story he did for Heavy Metal magazine, which I can't remember the exact title of it, but it looked like he, and it's the first time I'd seen it in some of his other original art that I'd seen, it looks like he drew it all with a number 3 rapidograph, which was a fat,
right,
kind of a tip.
Yeah.
So he drew everything with a very fat tip, and then went in with whiteout and removed the parts of the fat lines that he wanted to give a different effect. You know what I mean? It was,
right,
it was
right.
It was a total experiment. I just looked at it and go, why the hell would you do that? But it was fascinating at the same time because there was as much whiteout on each page as there was ink. But he wanted to see what happened, I think, as an artist and as a storyteller, just that it gave him a different feel and a different approach and a different style, that he went in heavy and then took away with whiteout what he wanted out of it. That was one of the ones that stands out to me as a moment I just went like, what the hell am I doing? I need to open a deli or something. I don't know.
I think one of the things is, as you say, because of the animation experience, there is, when you're working on animation, you're going, this is so labor intensive and there's so much drawing that has to be done, even just to produce, 10 seconds of movement. So there's why are you hitting yourself in the head with a hammer? Because it feels so good when I stop. So he would do that and then go, okay, it's just a comic book page. All I have to do is like 5 individual pictures and I'm done. As opposed to animation where it's just ka-chung, 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 and you got to keep doing that until you even get any kind of result out of it. So then you start going, okay, where am I putting my time in? And if you have that kind of analytical brain that is capable of doing airbrushed overlays to produce a color story, yeah, it's the sky's the limit then. Why not a number 3 rapidograph and then white out most of it? It's like, well, if you don't know why not, I certainly can't explain it to you. That's insane.
And it's one of those. It's insane, and it's one of those things that I feel like some of these great moments of had there been an opportunity and a wherewithal to sort of make it happen, and he just would have been. And I think he was incredibly uncomfortable with it as well. He was not a very social person, but I think it would be, having had the opportunity to sit down with him and go over some of his techniques and talk about some stuff he was doing, but I think it just never would have happened, even if he really wanted it to. I think he just would have been uncomfortable with it. Because I think it was just, he was a very natural talent, and you can, there's guys that are incredible craftsmen, incredible journeymen, and do just wonderful work on a regular pace, and then I think there are artists that are just driven and obsessed, and sort of that's a very personal thing to them.
Yeah.
I think he was that kind of guy. Yeah.
He set higher and higher watermarks for himself. Like once you have done that thing that he did with Warren, and I can still picture those pages and looking at them and going, I think this is still damp from the printer. There were just so many layers on there, and it was all built up, and it was an intensity of color that we had never seen before. It was really computer coloring before computer coloring existed.
Yep. Yeah. No. Totally. And I think that one of the things, we talked about this a bit the sessions before, just the fact that I never really learned how to draw, and I feel like part of the appeal and the gravitation to a guy like Kirby was, but I think Kirby really knew how to draw, and so his abstract approach to storytelling was very unique, in particular, and overly exaggerated in so many ways to make these explosive panels and take you the story at the Kirby pace, which is also usually pretty fast paced. But Corbin was an extension of that, where he also would take you at pace through these stories again, from coming out of these 8-page stories of getting a lot of information in a short period of time, and these Warren stories. But he also did it with his own stories, whether it be for Heavy Metal Magazine or Fantacore or whatever. But his overly exaggerated figures and that color technique, it would just, like, to repeat what you just said, is it would leap off the page at you,
Yeah.
purples and reds, and just like, it was just so intensely odd and dramatic at the same time. It's very, very appealing to certainly.
A complete.
77, I was a freshman in high school.
It's a complete way of seeing, which isn't. He wasn't looking at something and saying, "I want to do that." It was coming from inside of him. You could never mistake a Corbin piece for anybody else's.
Yep. And going back to something we touched on in another session, is that moment you said, "Where do your ideas come from?" That would be a question to ask.
Really?
Not that he'd probably answer us, but it would be like, dude, where do you get this stuff from? It's brilliant. But I think he was also incredibly well read, in that I think he read a lot of science fiction, a lot of books, and pulled from a lot of sources for that wealth of ammunition that he had stored up in secret little capsules and brain cells in his head that he could draw on for inspiration.
Yeah. It was just It was one of those things. I'm not a color guy. I'm a black and white guy, and having seen Ralph and having seen one of my favorite stories of his was Horrible Harvey's House. Do you remember that from?
Cool.
And it was how do you see things that clearly? The Volkswagen sort of like driving through the fields, and there's just this like little trail of flattened, hay or grass behind the Volkswagen, and then there's Horrible Harvey's house on the horizon, and there's the girl in the foreground, and I'm going like, how do you do something that is just that so completely memorable that it just there was a lot of really talented guys worked on those books, but Corbin was just in a complete level all his own. This is an underground. You're not supposed to draw this well. You're not supposed to frame it this well. It's supposed to be. I always think of Steve Bissett. Anytime I would draw a zombie, and it was like, "There, Steve. There's a zombie for you," and he'd go, "Too pretty." And it's like, it's a zombie. A zombie can't be pretty. Now, for Bissett, I know exactly what he was talking about, which sort of brings us obliquely back to the Turtles crossover. You had a lot of fun with those zombies.
Yep. Yeah, it was. I remember going to when I was young, going to the drive-in in Maine. It was the Portland Twin Drive-in in the summer. So they had a drive-in that they'd play a kids movie, so you'd be facing, say, east, and there's the big drive-in screen, and that would be a kids movie. But then on the west side, the other part would be showing a more grown-up movie. And I remember Night of the Living Dead on one of those features so well. And I don't remember the exact movie, but it was like, well, the rest of the family in the car is watching the Apple Dumpling Gang. I'm staring out the back window watching a silent version of Night of the Living Dead and going like, holy.
Really? Really?
And it was, so I love zombies from a very young age, and actually through a company that I think Bissett had done work for. There was a guy named Tom Schoolin ran a company called Fanico out of Albany,
Right.
New York, and he'd do shows. I did actually Eric Talbot and I did a comic called Zombie War, and that would have been probably early '90s, maybe even a little bit earlier. But it was a long love poem to George Romero and that. So I've just been a fan of that genre, and I like Beset zombies. I think Corbin did his Tales from the Arabian Nights. He did a number of really good zombie stories that were quite powerful.
That was definitely, I could see the Corbin in that, where you sat down and went, okay, no fake zombies. I'm going to draw each one of these individually and make a whole crowd of them. And it's like, that was when I was doing my recreation of the Turtles 8 cover in black and white for the Kickstarter. And I kept looking at the back cover going, I can't do that back cover. That is just way too many teeny tiny little zombies, and the fountain in the middle of them, and it's just copying, or it's just actually inking over blue lines. They're all going to be right there, Dave. You just have to do your version of it. And it's like, I never do crowd scenes like this. I never do each individual thing. And you did that through the whole book. You really didn't skimp on the crowd scenes.
It was one of those things, and well, thank you. And then it was one of those things that I would. This goes back again to Kirby, and even with Corbin again. It was just, and you've used it as a technique. Is if you want to take your audience into a place and space where this is the place where the story is taking place, you have to do that wide shot and that big shot and show it, and then you can go into the smaller panels and move them around the acting and the storytelling, the narrative. But I just fell in love with them, and that was another one of those moments where I would lay out one of these pages and Pete would go, "Well, what's wrong with you? This is ludicrous to put this kind of scene in this much detail." But it was just something that I don't know. I just felt that it was important to tell that part of the story. But and you look back at it, hindsight's always 20/20, and well, there were a lot of those panels that you didn't need 65 characters in it. You probably could have done it with 4 and get the same intent.
Yeah.
But it was, but it's just the challenge.
It could have been 200 pages. Like, imagine how many zombies you would have to draw if you had actually drawn the full Turtles 8 that you were thinking you were going to do.
Yep. In retirement, I'll have to go back and redo it, expand it.
Well, it was interesting because it was like Turtles 8. So you were still basically, I'm thinking about Cerebus number 8. I was still getting used to doing a full comic book.
Yep.
It was, sometimes this seems like a walk in the park, but most of the time this is just a lot of hard work.
Nope, and that's what I admired about, I've read a number of your interviews back in the day and your approach. And and even from, an occasional assistant that you would have to help you fill in blacks and things, and you would swear they changed it in some fashion and stuff. But you were the guy. You were 100% hands-on, doing it yourself, including the lettering.
Right.
It was you were that was why you were one of my main heroes is looking at a guy like Kirby and Corbin and Crumb and guys like they did the whole thing. It was theirs, and it was theirs and theirs alone to good, bad, or ugly. Whether you loved it or you hated it, this week and loved it or hated it the following week, it was you were flying the plane, and that was that's what really appealed to me was having that that ability to do that.
Another person from that time period, Frank Thorne, where Frank Thorne was one of the few guys working at Marvel where, yes, he could pencil it and ink it and do the lettering. He didn't have to send it into the office, so all of the time was working time.
Yep, and fantastic work too. I loved his. He was. It was just such a. Not to digress, because we could talk about this stuff all day easily. I loved the wonderfully organic nature of Frank's work, the fluidity of it, the line quality that changed, and the simplicity of some of the drawings. Where that's when you start picking up on different techniques of how to achieve an incredible amount of depth and pace, an incredible amount of depth with an amazingly few lines.
Right.
You have to draw 65 highly detailed zombies to get that illusion. It's like like Kubert used to do. And I was frustrated with Kubert from time to time, but I loved the drama of what he did. But a lot of times he would, he'd be doing a cover that needed to be done that afternoon, and he would Star Spangled War Stories, and he'd come out with something that was pretty powerful. But it was the detail was just enough to, if you're looking at it at a newsstand from across the drugstore, it was like, oh, look at that. And,
yeah. I remember Russ Heath saying, talking to Joe Kubert at one point about one of his war pages and going, seriously, how long did it take you to do this? Because it's Russ Heath, who never cut corners on anything. Everything was, as I call it, A Strange Death of Alex Raymond, non-stylized realism. Everything has to be exactly the way it's supposed to be, right down to the last rivet. And here we are. We've spilled over into 20 minutes, so we're going to have to cut it off here and have another cliffhanger. Come back if you want to hear Kevin and I driving ourselves crazy about the guys who are so much better than we are.
Absolutely, 100%.
All right.